Hello and welcome to Advanced Manufacturing Now, a podcast for manufacturing professionals. I'm your host, Steve Plumb, Editor-in-Chief for SME Media. Please remember to like and subscribe to our feed wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm joined today by Meaghan Ziemba, a longtime manufacturing champion and podcaster extraordinaire, as well as an all-around amazing person. Welcome to the show, Meaghan.
Hi, Steve. Thank you.
So it's always great to talk to you. And one thing that I didn't mention is that for the last almost 2 years, Meaghan has been one of our top contributing editors, which is the focus of the conversation today. In particular, I'd like to talk to you about the feature you wrote for our August issue, which is available online at advancedmanufacturing.org, as well as the printed version of the magazine. So the feature is about CNCs and process consolidation.
hmm
And if you can tell the story of, but the assignment editor, who shall remain nameless, was somewhat was somewhat vague. What made you just decide to lean into process consolidation?
Yeah, so I kind of like the vague assignments because it gives the writer freedom to kind of go in a direction, right, that they feel comfortable with or excited about. So when I started thinking about the vague assignment where the editor will not be named, I wanted to look beyond the incremental machine improvements. So I asked myself, what's the next competitive advantage in CNC machining? And process consolidation just seemed to stand out because manufacturers are under a lot of pressure these days to do more, like a lot more, with the equipment that they have and the people that they have. And anyone who's in manufacturing knows that we're facing, many challenges. One in which is around labor. So we can't find enough people to fit all the available positions that we have. So, what can manufacturers do to reduce setups, minimize part handling, and keep work on one machine? That seemed to be something that kept coming up as a strategic priority for many shops. And I was actually surprised um, how strongly every interview that I did um, really reinforced that premise. So, whether we are talking about software, work holding, machine accessories or automation, everyone kept coming back to the same goal. How do we eliminate friction throughout the manufacturing process? So I was really excited that when I did the interviews with every individual, even though there was differences in their backgrounds, they seemed to come back to that same goal as, holistically, how do these things complement one another instead of competing with each other?
So you talked about the experts. Can you share who you talked to?
Yeah, so I had 4 individuals. I had Mike Buckley, and gentlemen, if I pronounced your name wrong and you're listening to this, I wanna just apologize ahead of time. But I had Mike Buckley from Dassault Systems, which is also connected to SolidWorks. And one thing that I really liked about Mike is, aside from knowing him for a really long time, he actually has like 30 plus years of machining experience. So he started out on the shop floor, sweeping the floor, and then working his way up and then becoming a really good machinist. Well, his experience and time with Dassault, he actually brought the digital perspective to the story. And then I also talked to Dave Mao from Coma Precision, and he focused a lot on machining capabilities. And then John Dobozinski, who's from Laying Technique, I've talked to him several times before for other articles. Just another amazing human being. But he emphasized work holding and standardization, which we'll probably touch on later on in this conversation. And then Michael, I want to say it's Gaunce, but I'm not sure. It's Gaunce. So, Michael, if I pronounce that wrong, I'm so sorry. But he's from Shrunk, and he expanded the conversation into overall manufacturing strategy. So I really appreciated that none of them really contradicted each other. They were looking at the same challenge through different lenses. And I think their different experiences in the areas that their expertise in really complemented one another and actually focused on, how do we get process consolidation throughout the whole workflow instead of just one main operation.
So process consolidation, can encompass a lot of different things. As a baseline, what all did it entail from your conversations?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, I think it's much broader than combining machine operations. Like it's not okay, here's one operation that we have over here and then we have another one over here, so let's see how we can combine it through automation or anything like that. I think process consolidation really involves, reducing setups, minimizing part transfers, eliminating unnecessary handling, and keeping more value added work on one machine whenever it makes technical and economic sense. But it can also include things like planning, work holding, programming, inspection, and standardization, and even like complex scheduling. I think it can include. So ultimately, it's about optimizing the entire workflow rather than one individual operation or one area of your shop.
Which may take a little bit more upfront planning and
Mhm.
working to get collaboration, but
Right.
it doesn't necessarily mean buying a new $500,000 machine or a couple $1 million machines, or even necessarily a new software package.
Correct. Yes. I think that is like one of the assumptions out there with all these new technologies. You either have to invest more money in something that's more expensive, shiny, and new, rather than trying to figure out, okay, what can I do with what I have? And sometimes the answer is you just kind of have to rethink and be creative and think outside of the box to work with what you already have and not have to reinvent the wheel.
Was there some low-hanging fruit that, the experts identified? Ways that companies have been always doing it one way, but if they looked at it something differently, they can improve efficiency almost immediately?
Yeah, so John from Lang, he brought up in our conversation 3-axis versus 5-axis machines. So with 5-axis machines, the assumption is, okay, I have a complex geometry. I have so many tool changes that I need to make. So I definitely need a 5-axis machine to accomplish this goal. He mentioned that it could just be a matter of having creative fixturing. So how do you hold the part and what sort of fixturing can you use to hold that part? And a lot of the times you can use a 3-axis machine to do a lot of parts that are assumed to only be made on fifth axis machine. On the other hand, David talked about situations where adding machine capability, such as rotary table and used access heads, made better sense because it removed entire setups on machine transfers. So I think really the lesson is more about choosing the right combination of machine capability, work holding, and process design than it is about buying a new machine or more equipment. So you really, as a shop owner or even as a machine operator, you really have to think about, as you mentioned earlier, the whole picture and what the steps are and where you can eliminate some of that extra work within the machine.
Yeah, even with, the multi, access machines and functional machines, a lot of times it does come down to tool holding and work holding, you
Mhm.
know, things that people take for granted that have been around for forever, but sometimes that they rethink that, and sometimes it is automating some of those functions, but sometimes
Mhm.
it's just doing it a little bit differently, tweaking it a little bit differently.
So that was brought up a lot with John and Dave where just thinking about what you can add, but there's also limitations in there. So you have to think about the tool reach, the repeatability, the machine envelope, because if you don't have the right machine envelope, you can't really add different types of tables or the access head or anything because you just won't have room for it. So you do need to think about what limitations you have within your machine that would prevent you from adding extra fixturing or any other accessories that could help make your machine perform like a fifth axis machine.
Speaking of repeatability, I don't remember if you said this or you're quoting somebody on this, but you're saying that there is a difference between repeatability by intent and repeatability by habit. So maybe you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so repeatability by habit, I think, depends on experienced operators knowing what works. So you have the older machinists who have had 30 plus years of experience and they have all this tribal knowledge. So they're used to like running a machine, and if something goes wrong, they have to figure it out. And I think with so many years behind their belt, they're just used to looking at something and knowing right away, okay, that's going to work or that's not going to work. Repeatability by intent, however, I think builds consistency into the process itself through standardized tooling, work holding, programming, and procedures. So, Michael actually emphasized creating systems that don't rely on tribal knowledge, but instead produce consistent results regardless of who is running the machine. And I think that's important to think about because as we continue to struggle with the current workforce challenges we're facing, we don't have the time to wait for younger generations to gain that 30 plus years of experience, especially if we want to maintain our competitive edge with the rest of the world. So I think what Michael was pointing at is like, okay, we need to start standardizing some of these fixturing procedures and processes so that when we do have someone that's green come in, they just have to follow the standardized procedures and keep things running at a flow where, with older generations who are about to retire, yeah, we're going to lose that tribal knowledge, but if we start standardizing some of it, we can maintain that tribal knowledge and start documenting it.
Did you get a feel about where the industry is in terms of achieving that? Is this kind of the early stages and the people you talked were way ahead of the curve, or?
I think we're still in the early stages of it because one of the things that was mentioned, so a lot of the documentation is going to rely on some of the software platforms that are coming into play. And one of the conversations that came up when I was talking to Mike Buckley from Dassault Systems, he's like, especially with the older generations, they don't see the value in the software and they're still putting more value on the hardware itself. And I don't think you can live with one without the other. Like, if you want the full potential of your modern day machine, you're going to have to know how to use the software that's behind it and understand what the data is that it's collecting and then how you can use that data to your advantage. So I still think we're kind of entering into a new space, especially with AI. I know that's a buzzword going around and people are already getting annoyed with it, but in what ways can we use AI to really collaborate on all this data and make sure that we're getting the full potential out of our modern day machines?
Are you sure you're pronouncing that right? Is it AI or is that one of those words that you're not sure about?
Artificial intelligence? I'm actually working with food manufacturing on something right now, and AI is something completely different in their industry than it is in this one.
Ah.
So, I'm learning a lot about the different acronyms for AI that what it can mean. So it's pretty hilarious.
Well, you did take the words out of my mouth though, because I was gonna follow up with AI and whether or not that came up with in your conversations with these people, and if they think it's a useful tool now or can be in the future.
I think it's still in it. Like, AI has been around forever. It's not something new to our industry, but because you have the large language models that it's pulling
Mhm.
from, it's still pulling data from everywhere. So I think one of the things that shops need to be aware of is what kind of data they want pulled into with the AI. They need to make sure that it's clean data and it's not biased and it's not anything that can, be incorrect. So, I feel like we still have some work to do on that, but I feel like companies are starting to take advantage of it and finding benefits to using it and integrating it within their procedures and their processes.
So you touched upon the workforce shortage ongoing and some of the technical challenges. Are there any other constraints, common constraints that were identified that have previously prevented companies from becoming more efficient in their operations?
So I think one of the big misconceptions there is that flexibility comes from having a different solution for every job. When I talked to Michael from Shunk, he challenged that idea completely and argued that flexibility actually comes from standardization. So if your work holding, tool holding, and programming practices are standardized, operators aren't reinventing the process every single time a new part comes through their shop. They're simply just adapting a proven system. So I think the example I mentioned earlier, also with John from laying technology around thoughtful fixturing and how it allows a shop to present parts differently so that it can make them with just a three-axis machine. I think that's another way that you can kinda get over some of the constraints if you have a three-axis machine because it demonstrates that flexibility is created through process design and not necessarily through purchasing new equipment. With high mixed low volume environments, I think they stand to benefit the most from this philosophy because changeovers happen constantly. Like every minute spent building fixtures, touching off tools or figuring out how to hold a part adds up over the course of the day. So we can also go back to David Miles' example of the rotary table and the U-axis head. Those instances allowed more operations to stay on the same machine versus switching between multiple machines. So you're not you don't have to have a specialized machine to create a product if you can put the rotary table or U-axis head on that same machine. So that cuts back the transfer of parts between two points in your shop. And through that example, you're not just reducing the setups, but you're also reducing schedule complexity, material handling, and opportunities for human error. And what really stood out about that throughout these interviews was that flexibility wasn't defined as the ability to do anything. It was defined as the ability to respond to changing production demands without rebuilding the entire manufacturing process each
Mhm.
time.
Okay. Well, I think you kind of beat me to the punch on my last question, which was, what were some of the key takeaways for the article? But, and correct me if I'm wrong, but standardizing tooling and fixturing can help shops tremendously in reducing changeovers. Work holding is a key factor in the success of such processes. And consolidation happens in increments. It's not like tomorrow we're gonna do this and it's a done deal.
Yeah. So I think the wrong way to look at it is that it's a checklist or a piece of equipment you can buy. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. So for readers, I'm really hoping that the key message they take away from the article that I wrote is that and I believe one of the interviewees actually said this quote, where are we creating unnecessary work and how do we eliminate it? So I think that's the whole philosophy surrounding what process consolidation is. Again, you're not just thinking, okay, we're going to, like you said, we're going to have this done by tomorrow. And we're only looking at one individual operation or machine within our shop. We're actually looking at how the whole thing works together and flows through our shop. And I think that's really where the next competitive advantage is going to come from. It's not just how to make this thing over here better, but with this thing over here being better, how does that affect everything else around it? And then make us more efficient, faster, and help us create higher quality parts. Because yeah, you can go at faster speeds and produce a lot of parts, but if it's not a good part, that speed isn't gonna mean anything. You're gonna have to have a lot of rework done. So, I think it just is a combination of all of these things and how they complement one another and not compete with one another.
Well, I'm glad you identified the whole solution there because we are a wholesome. We strive to be a wholesome show.
Yeah.
So, Megan, thanks again for joining. I couldn't resist that. You teed me up for that. Megan, thanks again for joining us today. So I know I'm hopefully going to see you at IMTS where we can talk about all the new technologies and the ongoing Detroit Chicago pizza debate.
Yes, we need to do that because I think so I'm near Chicago. I'm closer to Chicago than I am Detroit. So I Chicago pizza has a special place in my heart. But when I went to Detroit and tried their pizza, I might have had my mind changed about who has the better pizza. So
Yeah, you might not want to say that too loudly in Chicago.
it's okay. I can defend it. I can defend myself.
So, what else are you working on these days?
So I am really excited. I revamped Mavens in Manufacturing and I started having more guests on back in June. So I have 7 women coming on for 2026. I'm writing a book around every guest that I have for this year. And then I'm prepping for IMTS just like everybody else. And I'm really excited because I'm bringing a robotics team to Chicago. Their name is Turtle Tech
Who
and they are a first robotics team that I help mentor, and I'm really excited that they get to come to Chicago again. The last time they came to Chicago, they actually took pictures of different booths, and one of the pictures helped them with the end of arm tooling that they were using for their robot, and it actually helped them advance further in the competition, and they won a special innovation award for it. So, if you are a major company or just a manufacturer, it's so important if you sponsor or support those teams because they remember the companies that help them and they become loyal forever fans when you help them. So, just food for thought.
and the turtles of what was it?
Turtle Tech?
Turtle Tech. Okay.
Yep,
Um,
TEK.
I'll be sure to look out for it. And if listeners want to find out more about Mavens and manufacturing and all other cool Meaghan Ziemba stuff, where should they go?
Absolutely go to my LinkedIn page. So I'm very active on that page. I have a bunch of other social channels, but you can find them by going to LinkedIn.
And for the latest manufacturing news and other Advanced Manufacturing Now podcasts, please visit advancedmanufacturing.org. If you like what you hear and see, remember to subscribe and like our podcast and subscribe to our content.